back when it was a good one. It wasn't the terrorist group. But certainly, he didn't speak too much about that either. And I only heard from an aunt that he had actually mentioned how the British had come in and they were looking for him, and they ended up grabbing his brother instead, and so forth. But so yeah, it's I think it's that old thing that if you don't learn from your history, you're bound to repeat it. And,
Correct.
Maybe that's where some of the younger folks are going for the Bernie Sanders, is they don't realize what actually happens.
Correct. And there's a lot of that is going on. I can't blame them. Kids at that age, we were once, and during that age, we were much more idealistic than being pragmatic in the world itself. And some kids would grow out of it really quickly. When they get a job, they realize, and like I said, whoa, what is going on here? It's like when I was talking to my students, they said, oh, Mr. K, they need to tax these so much, the rich and all of that. And I said, guys, are you kidding me? They said, yeah, I'm for real. And it's like, okay, so when you go to get a job, you're earning $30,000 a year, and the government takes $10,000 out of that. And he said, no, that's my money. I'm not giving that away to you. And said, now you're being unfair. And they said, no, that's not unfair about it. It's their money. And I find it really comical just to listen to the conversation, right, that it's okay to take someone else's money, but it's not easy to give it up. So there's a lot of that social economic debates going on for many generations. There's no question about it. Every generation, every 20 years, there's always the evolving communications for all of that on a yearly basis.
It's interesting. In the town of Dracut, in the primary, they went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump on the Republican side, and overwhelmingly for Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side. And having, as I said, served for 22 years, I think I have a somewhat pretty good handle on politics in Dracut. And what I think is that I don't think that Bernie Sanders got the pro-Bernie Sanders vote. I think he got the anti-Hillary Clinton vote in the town of Dracut. But it's interesting. You're a Democrat, Republican?
Republican.
Republican. Okay. So is there anybody else running in the Republican side?
Only me.
Okay. Good.
So it's.
I just want to throw this in there for people who realize how far your family had to walk. It's like walking from Lowell to Concord, New Hampshire.
Wow.
That's how far they had to walk. Would you go to Thailand?
Yes.
Okay, that's how far Thailand is from Baden-Bang. It's from here to Concord, New Hampshire. Imagine, okay, well, let's hold hands.
Yeah.
And it isn't like you could walk up Route 3. They didn't have Route 3. They had to walk through back roads, I'm going to guess, or regular roads.
A lot of back roads. Remember, there's hardly any shoes to be worn, too.
50 miles, a long way to walk with your family.
So some of the shoes we found, we can use the spare tires or flat. Those tires, just cut it and make it into shoes, or just barefooted.
Now, my ignorance in this is so bad. Were the military along the way, were you in fear, or was it at that point walking? Could you have been stopped at any point by the regime? And was it just the physical exposure of walking that far, or did you have the fear that you could be stopped at any moment?
I'm not sure about the fear in my experience, my own cognitive looking back. It's not a fear of being stopped, it's the fear of mistrust of anyone who in uniform, that they can rob and kill us for any survival needs that they need. So I think that a lot of us, hopefully I'm not speaking on their behalf, is that until this day, a lot of Cambodians still do not trust anyone in uniform.
You know, that goes back to when I was on the Boy Scout board in Greater Lowell, and I remember they were having difficulty getting boys to join the Boy Scouts because of the uniforms.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's a lot of distrust on that. There's a lot of distrust in military uniform. When I got here in the city of Lowell in 1987, I joined the ROTC at Aloha, and I was wearing it, and my neighbor during that time, his son wanted to join the ROTC. Parents were profusely refusing them to wear it. They said that, well, you put on uniform, you're going to be drafted to become a military personnel and all of that. Little did they know that once you turn of age, you are required to register for the civil service for that. Not for the civil service, what did they call that?
Selective service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The selective service for that. We are required to do that by law. I'm not sure they're enforceable nowadays. I don't even know if any of our kids nowadays are required to do that. But way back then, we were required.
When did you become an American citizen?
1995, April 1995. It was funny how I took that citizenship test. I just got out from the American history class, so I went to an interview. George, I think, yeah, it was just like George Bush 41, yeah, the father. So I went there and I talked to the interviewer and I said, forgive me if I get confused the difference between George Bush and George Washington, because both of them are George W., remember? And so we sat down and we talked about the American colonialism during the War of Independence and all of that. We were sitting there and just talking for about half an hour. Supposedly, he's supposed to ask me about these random questions out of 100 questions about American histories and all of that. So after we finished talking, I know he was writing everything down. I thought he was writing my answer and all of them. So at the conclusion, he just stood up and he extended his arm. He said, well, congratulations, you become the United States citizens. And I said, well, that's it? No questions from them? You know? He said, yeah, you're fine. It seems like you know more about American history than Americans do. And I was shocked. There's like, you know, being a young lad, I never knew that a lot of Americans would be not passionately knowing about the history of the country. Like you said, for those who fail to learn history, you're doomed to repeat it. And ever since then, it's been great. It just.
Do you remember being sworn in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember getting that little flag. I remember when I got my citizenship paper and everything. I was supposed to take my citizenship down in Boston because my residence says that I'm here in the city of Lowell, but I ended up taking the test up in Rutland, Vermont. And it's like, I made a justification to them, said, hey, I'm a student here at Norwich University, and Rutland, Vermont, it's a short drive, it's only about an hour and a half, versus having to drive 4 hours to go to Boston. So they're making an exception of that.
Good. So why Republican versus Democrat? What made you decide that?
You know, that question has always been asked. And the two-party itself, when you look at it, has a very similar idea. I think the execution of it, it's different. The political campaign regarding to it, it's so much different. And I just believe that the reason why that I believe in the Republican Party, because of the advocacy of a small government, less government, less money taken from the people and give more money to those American citizens that earn their money for that. So physically speaking, I'm very conservative. When they're talking about raising taxes on the citizen in order to pay for civil services and so forth, I have to think 3 or 4 times before I actually say yay or nay. But I will be dissecting any law, any amendment that's been introduced. We'll be dissecting it, where the money is going, how are we going to be able to trim, to be very cognizant about spending people's money. We have to be very conservative about it. And then we also have to let the citizen know why is the need for raising the money for the social needs and so forth. But at the same time, we cannot be able to liberally getting the money and then having the program go on and on and on for decades and decades, realizing that some of these services may not viable to what we're looking at. And the expanding of the federal government, like under George Bush, to the DHS, which is the Department of Homeland Security, I thought it was a bad idea. To expand such an operation like that, because you're centralizing the power of the government to oversee the daily lives of each other Americans. I was gravely disappointed that he created that department. I saw the aspect behind it, but I just didn't like it. Because, you know, to have a centralized power by the government is always instill a lot of fear into me, because Big Brother is always going to be watching you regardless. But when it comes to the social issues, my goodness, what happened behind closed doors is none of my business. Leave it alone. I mean, if two folks, two gay couple want to get married, I don't know if that's going to hurt me. I know this definitely is not going to hurt me a bit. None. I mean, what happened behind closed doors, that's fine. And they said, what about gay marriages and so forth? I said, welcome aboard to the institution of marriage, right? Oh, and by the way, do you know there's plenty of divorce lawyers along with that? If you want to come,
I'm one of them.
yeah, if you want to come, fine by me. But it is like, well, you know, it's morally wrong. I said, how is that morally wrong when the two people are just in love with each other? I mean, you look at a heterosexual couple, they're in love with each other, and one day, I shouldn't say one day, that's incrementally led up to the divorces and all that. It's not an overnight thing. People have a different mentality and changes, and it happened, all of that. It's none of my business to tell people what's going on behind closed doors.
Question for you. It's something that we're going to be hit with. We are being kind of bombarded now. Caitlyn Jenner just came out with support transgender rights and the rights for transgender individuals to use whatever locker room or bathroom that they choose to use, especially in schools. What do you think about that?
Oh my goodness, I have long thought about that. It goes back to what Betsy said, that could play into the mental issues that our students, our kids are experiencing in terms of their sexual orientations and all that. I think we need to be able to go ahead and be very cognizant and the sensitivity to all of these students and society as a whole to look at it. The question is, Caitlyn Jenner, my understanding that she transformed from Bruce Jenner to Caitlyn Jenner, from a male to a female, fully transfer. Forgive me, is that the right word, transform? Or change her sexual, not only her identification, but from the anatomically speaking, from a male to female. That's fine, and they can use the female aspect of that. What about the individuals who are in transgender that are between it? You know, we need to have involved a sensible communication of all aspects. And it's like if the individual is in the middle of transforming for one reason or another, do we allow the individual to use a gender-specific restroom for that? We need to be able to go ahead and get our business folks to be involved in, because to convert or add an additional restroom for them to use, it's going to cost them more money that they need to spend. Are they willing to do that, or they're not willing to do it? Or allow them to make that what is viable economically for them. And I know there's a lot of debate on that, but I think society needs to come together to have that discussions rather than vilifying the topic itself.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I actually filed legislation that prohibits them from using a different bathroom until their anatomical change. Specifically, I filed it in regards to the Commissioner of Education sending out a guidance to all the schools saying that the transgender individuals can use whichever, and specifically said that the feelings of the other students didn't matter. And I think once you do that and you take the minority rights over majority rights, and truly I think that that's taking their rights away for their privacy. And I had a conversation with him with a group of legislators asking that we have a third individual alternative for any student. So it wouldn't just be the transgender locker room or the transgender bathroom, for any student that felt uncomfortable undressing or changing in front of other students. That there's plenty of students who, especially at the high school age, who don't want to change in front of other people. I see, like at Fenway, when my dad was alive, we took him down there and he was in a wheelchair. And they have a family restroom so that I could bring him in his wheelchair and help him. They have it so parents can bring a child of an alternate sex in with them to use the restrooms. And I think that is the alternative is, and I think you're right, once we mandate it on the businesses and so forth, but I think especially where children are involved in the public schools, there needs to be an alternative.
I agree. I think it's a sensible. I'm glad you introduced that to be able to have bring the topic into a better discussions with the community and where this. I think it's a good viable way to be able to give other people the opportunity to use their privacy, and I know the level of confidence we cannot be able to dictate on or interpret how other people feel by changing in a locker room and all of that. So it's a great legislature to sound.
Do you have any announcements or fundraisers or anything coming up?
There will be a lot of campaign coming up, so there's a lot of issues going on in the Cambodian communities. Hopefully that I can ask John if I can come up here to have that dedication to have just the Cambodian community so that the city of Lowell can be able to understand more